April Easter brought another fine spell of weather to Scotland. Blue skies and warm sunshine, but with fresh winds, were on the forecast, as I headed for Kayakers in the island of Skye, for another adventure with the Kayakers. I, of course, was going by Guppy, my 2.75 metre F-rib and 6 horsepower outboard. We spent 4 fantastic days in the water of the inner sound off the east coast of Skye, covering approximately 50 miles, visiting the satellite islands of Pabay and the Crowlin Islands. This is a story of the latest adventure. A fresh breeze blew as my brother Douglas, Ian, Alan and myself loaded our boat on the shore adjacent to Kayakers car park. It was noon and around the time of high tide when I launched the Guppy. I took the boat a quick run round the bay to heat up the outboard as the guys continued to load and rig their kayaks. I was happy everything was working as it should. And of course, because the boat was full of camping gear and beer, I was limited to displacement speeds only. Not that it bothers me, as I'm experienced enough to know it's perfectly safe to go to sea with small, slow boats, assuming you know how to work the winds and the tides. The guys hoisted their sails and then we were off, heading under the Skye Bridge. We were full of happy anticipation of the journey ahead of us, heading northeast along the coast towards Plockton. It's a stunning coastline with lots of reefs and small scenic islands, which would give us shelter from the offshore winds. My outboard was given an easy time too, running on quarter throttle as I was in no hurry to go anywhere. The views across the inner sound to the island of Skye with its magnificent Crowlin Mountains is simply superb. And now we were clear of the buzz of Kayakers. It was time to stop on our own little island for lunch. We landed in a small stone bay and scoffed sandwiches while admiring the views. Satisfied by both sandwiches and scenery, we happily clambered back in our boats and headed on our way. At times the seabed is only a couple of feet below the boat, which suits my slow speed. And at other times the reefs and little islands disappear, letting the sea swell from the exposed inner sound bounce the little boat along. I was now a little ahead of the kayakers, so pulled over onto a smooth pebble beach to give them time to catch up. And I didn't have long to wait. Alan passed first, sporting his white sail. Then Douglas arrived with his red and white sail. And finally Ian followed up the rear with his grey sail. Each and every one of us were thoroughly enjoying our day in the water. Nearing Plockton and our chosen camping spot for the night, I was in the lead again, so landed in a lovely little island to soak in the scenery of this special place. I don't think I could have picked a better place to land in the whole of the Caribbean Sea. From my little rocky perch, I watched the guys head for their chosen campsite, then followed them in. We had landed in a small bay of paradise, of turquoise-coloured sea and white coral sand. Our tents were quickly set up, supper was scoffed, the fire was lit, and we slurped brew dogs and Guinness while planning future adventures. For me, this is what boating is all about. We then happily sat watching the sun go down while supping little sips of whisky until day one was done. We awoke to another perfect morning. Full-on sunshine and a gentle breeze even enticed Douglas to go for a swim before breakfast. After eating, we packed our boats and headed on our way. Our plan for the day was to return the way we came the day before, then head across to the island of Pabay, then cross to Skye and set up camp. But first I wanted to continue to Plockton, knowing I would soon catch them up. I was right on the edge of a weather front, while the cooling of sky basked in sunshine. The hills around Locharan were now under cloud. As I approached Plockton, the easterly winds started to ruffle the water, and the temperatures began to drop. Low tide meant that there would be a long walk over mud to reach Plockton village, so I didn't land. I was happy enough to turn around and head back to catch up with the guys going the opposite direction. Going at displacement speed assisted by wind and waves meant I soon caught up. We landed again at Kayakers to have lunch before heading west under the Skye Bridge. Our plan being, I was going to land at Broadford and Skye to get some supplies and petrol. I would then meet up with the others on the island of Pabay, where we would continue on to Skye for our evening camp. However, being an open sea and small boats means we have to be totally flexible, as changing conditions can alter our plans. Ahead of me I could clearly see the low-lying island of Pabay, and I could sense the wind freshening. I was heading for Broadford at the foot of Ben the Caillich, the highest hill in this clip. The initial force 2 winds that were blowing when I left the Skye Bridge were now force 3 and still rising. I landed in the shelter of a little harbour, not far from the co-op and the petrol station, to save the boat getting trashed on the beach. After my shopping trip, the wind was now a good force 4, and I had 2 miles of open sea to cross to get to Pabay and the Kayakers. Needless to say, the spray was flying, making filming impossible, as my camera gear is not waterproof. However, I did make Pabay with no problem. The little F-rib is surprisingly seaworthy for its size. This clip, taken when I landed, shows the waves I had to go head into on the crossing. We had our lunch and a look around, hoping the wind would soon drop again, to allow us to continue our journey to Skye. However, the wind had its own plans and they didn't match ours, so we accepted that we couldn't get off the island until it dropped again. Pabay is not a very tent-friendly island, due to the rough ground and the bramble bushes that cover it. The owner of the island was at home, so we politely asked if we could pitch our tents in his harbour area. He happily agreed, so we set up camp for the night. We sheltered from the wind behind the harbour wall and cooked supper while slurping more brew dogs and Guinness, until it was time for bed. It was a noisy night with tent flapping in the wind, then a full-dawn chorus of seagulls and geese honking and squabbling. However, the wind subdued just as we arose for breakfast, leaving a beautiful calm sea. Our plan was to cross 6 miles of open sea to reach the Applecross Peninsula, going via the Crowlin Islands. Tents were dismantled and boats packed, and then we were off. It's extremely shallow water around Pabay at low tide, so I had to keep well offshore, and even then I was only in 4 feet of water. The guys can easily follow the shoreline in their shallow draft kayaks. This video clip gives a good indication why we found the island unfriendly for camping. It's covered in briar bushes. Ahead lies the island of Skye, then Rassie, then Rona, and then the Crowlin Islands. Pabay was now just a distant memory left behind. and I was now approaching the Crowlin Islands. The Crowlins consist of 3 barren outcrops of rock which are uninhabited. I found a small stony bay to land on and have my morning coffee while waiting for the guys to cross. As I slurped my hot beverage in this quiet little bay, I watched the guys playing chicken with a larger boat, one of the hazards of an open sea crossing. However, Ian had already contacted the boat by VHF radio, so we were aware of each other's positions. I also watched the dolphins slip quietly past, or perhaps it was just a playful porpoise. I then headed on my way to meet up with the guys who were getting closer every minute. We met up and landed on the southern inlet to the natural harbour which splits the southern islands in two. A lovely solitude and shelter spot for a boat anchorage. And after a quick look around, we continued on our circumnavigation of the Crowlin Islands. At first glance, the coastline is uninteresting, but on closer inspection, I was fascinated by the way the different layers of rock contorted over each other, forming fascinating patterns. Perhaps a geologist's delight. I'm certain that I read somewhere that the mountains of Skye and the rocks around the coast are some of the oldest in the world. I now had to navigate the shallow and narrow channel which separates the southern islands from the northern island. I took it very slow and easy, as I knew I couldn't afford to lose my propeller by hitting a rock. And once through, I waited to film the kayakers passing through the passage. As they paddled south again, I continued north to the very tip of the northern island. Then once again headed back to catch up with the others. Douglas landed near Church Bay, and I presumed he was going to look at the abandoned crofts, but when he returned I saw he had collected a large mooring buoy marked with his initials, and give him his dues. Like a dog with a bone, he wouldn't let it go. He took it all the way back to Kayakers. Having seen enough of the Crowlin Islands, we now headed across the Colas Moor towards the Applecross Peninsula, where we intended to camp for the night. We landed in a little bay beside a remote bothy, and although we could have slept in the house, we opted to use our tents. As it was still early afternoon, the kayakers decided to explore the coast a little more, so I happily volunteered to look after the campsite while we were gone. Not that I was a good guard, as I slurped a couple of brew dogs and then fell fast asleep. I awoke when I heard the noise of a passing boat, and not long later the guys returned. The wind was beginning to rise again, so we lit our fire in the bothy and cooked our supper there too. We polished off the last of the Guinness and brew dogs, then retired to our tents at sundown, and day 3 was done. Day 4, which was our last day, was a lovely sunny morning, but with a fresh easterly wind. Tents were dismantled and boats packed after a leisurely breakfast. I guess we were hoping the offshore wind would drop a little, but it didn't. It meant we had to cross Loch Carn and Loch Carshorn, which were exposed to wind and waves. The guys headed straight into the waves to reach a narrower crossing, but I decided to take a more direct and diagonal crossing. In truth, it wasn't that bad a crossing, but I put the camera away as it was quite a wet one. And to cut a long story short, we all arrived back at Kayakers safe and sound. Another adventure done. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.